Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unwired. I am your host, Outspoken Samantha. We have a lot to talk about today, and I appreciate you guys being here and just ready to get into a few things. So, of course, we are going to talk about the VP debate that took place last night between JD Vance and Tim Walz. And I am really excited to hear all of your thoughts on how everything played out and what you heard, what you saw, what you laughed at, what your favorite clips were. So please contribute to the conversation, and we will get into all that. We're also going to return to the P. Diddy story at the end of it, because this is a story that we cannot forget about, that we cannot let slide through the cracks, because so much is going to continue to come out, and I want to continue to provide updates on it, because it's not just about what P. Diddy did, what did he do, but who all knew and what they knew and when they knew it. So we need to touch on that. There might be a couple of other topics that we touch on at the end. It just depends on how much time we have. But those are the two main things that I want to discuss with you today. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so again, welcome to Unwired, and I would love it, before we get started, if each of you joining the chat would hit the share button and invite, I promise I can talk. Invite at least one person to the live stream that you think would be interested in the conversation today, and also leave your comments below, and I will read as many as I can. Let me just make sure that I am sharing this. I know some of you have said before, don't get on your phone while you're on the live stream, but if I don't share it, then I will forget. So this is obviously something I just want to do right at the beginning. So let me know in the comments if you were able to watch the live stream, or not the live stream. What am I talking about? Watch the debate last night, because I found it very, very interesting. And before we get into this, I just want to say I was very cautiously optimistic, because we all know that JD Vance is very capable of, here, let me put this more in front of me because it feels like it's really over there. Some people fight with teleprompters. I fight with my microphone. But I was very cautiously optimistic about this debate, because we know that JD Vance is very, very capable of handling the mainstream media. He's very capable of handling attacks from any angle. You know, people can bring up any issue with him, and he stays focused, he stays calm, and he knows how to pivot directly to the actual issue at hand and not respond to just talking points. So it was so I knew that he was going to do well, but I also know that when it comes to how the mainstream media, how the Democrats handle these things, how they fight, nothing is off the table, and nothing should really surprise me anymore. So it was a little bit, I felt like I needed to be cautious, because as much as of a buffoon as Tim Walz is, we know that he was going to get help from the moderators, and that he was going to be bailed out in a lot of ways. And we just never know what that is going to look like. So that was very interesting to see, because I have to say that even with as much as he was bailed out last night, he still failed miserably. So it's totally fine. But so let's get into this. Now, I want to preface this by saying that no, I don't necessarily think that this debate changed anybody's vote. I don't think that it is going to make a lot of people lean right or sway their vote in either direction. I don't think that these debates really do that. I do think it is more of a performance at this point, as much as I would like people to actually listen to these things and take them seriously and actually listen to what these candidates are saying. I just don't think that they have the sway that they used to, or carry out the purpose that they were initially probably meant for. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that these things have any significance or value at all. And I don't think that means that there wasn't any impact. I honestly think that the impact was a positive one, and I think it was positive for the right, which I will get into in a little bit. But first, overall, the general consensus online across social media that I think that I've seen pretty much agreeance, is that the word? Agreeance? We're going to go with that. Agreement on across the board on both the right and the left, despite a few unhinged takes by like Rachel Maddow and Joe Scarborough, is that JD Vance won. That he, I mean, pretty much wiped the floor with Tim Walz. Walz looked very nervous. He looked very uncomfortable. And I think that how you think these candidates performed obviously depends on which side of the aisle that you're on. If you're on the right, you know that this was a phenomenal debate performance by JD Vance. And if you're on the left, you know that your candidate pretty much just pooped the bed. And honestly, there were times I honestly thought Tim was actually going to poop his pants. He looked so uncomfortable. And I say that half jokingly, but half seriously, because this man looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. As some people said, you know, JD was there to thrive, and Waltz was there to survive, and he did survive. So he accomplished what he set out to do. So to recap all of this, I want to touch on a couple of the issues that were brought up and address the performance of the moderators kind of briefly. I want to pick a few highlights. We'll look at some reactions from the media. And then I did find a couple of TikToks of people responding on TikTok to this that I thought were they just kind of made me smile, and I just think it's worth throwing that in there. But as far as the issues, as the moderators kept reminding us, there was a lot to get to. And I hope that no one was taking a drink every time they said we have a lot to get to, because if you did, your liver is probably disintegrated at this point this morning. But the main issues that people across the country want to hear about is the border, about, you know, the illegal immigration process. We are seeing so much chaos and so much just destruction happen because of taking in so many people that we do not have the resources to take care of. Good morning, Shane. Thank you for joining. But that is something that people want to talk about. They want to talk about the border. How is this going to be addressed? Because we've been hearing nonstop reports for 3 years about how many people are flooding over the border. We have seen video footage of people just lining up by the thousands. We've seen stampedes. We have seen all measure of chaos because of this. And then we learn that the Biden-Harris administration are actually just bypassing the border entirely, the southern border, and just flying people into the country and dropping them off. So at this point, you know, they were kind of able to do this for a few years, and a lot of people didn't really feel or see the impacts of it, even though we know that the impact was being felt by people in numerous communities. It has gotten to the point where they can't hide it anymore. And everybody can see what is happening in places like Springfield and Aurora and Chicago and New York and all over California. And the Biden-Harris, or now the Harris-Walz ticket, has to explain not only how this happened, but how they plan to fix it when half of that ticket is responsible for this happening. So people want answers on that. How is this going to be fixed? The second issue, of course, that they had to touch on was the economy. I think that those are the two main things that people want to have some reassurance on, because it breaks my heart every day how many videos I see of people. And normally I mock people for crying online because it's not okay. It gives me the ick. But this is something where I am glad people are getting online and being very raw about, because people cannot afford groceries. They cannot afford the bare minimum. I saw a video the other day of a mom talking about how she's like, we can't afford the goods as they are priced now. We can't afford food at the prices that we are seeing now at the grocery store. If they go up anymore, we are going to break financially. And I think that is so relatable to so many people, my family included. You know, we are one of those families that live paycheck to paycheck. And if things get any more expensive, that is going to cause a lot of problems for our family as well. So I completely relate to that. So those are the two main things. So when they were first asked about the economy, we will get into a couple of clips here. I just want to make sure that I have them in order, but I know that you guys will grant me a little bit of grace if I happen to click on the wrong one. Okay, so this is the first kind of, I believe this was basically the opening issue. I know they talked about climate change a little bit, but we won't talk about that today because whatever. But I believe the opening issue was on the economy. And basically it was, do you trust Donald Trump or Kamala Harris more with the economy? And we'll listen to Tim Walz kind of go over what his and Kamala's vision for the economy is. And then we'll listen to JD Vance basically eviscerate what he is saying.
Trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
Voters say.
Ha, I remembered to unmute my mic. For anybody that has joined a live stream with me before knows that it is a constant battle for me to remember to unmute my microphone. So, you know, it really just comes down to anything that Walz says that Harris wants to do, she could have done already. And I think that, first of all, as I have said before, if Kamala Harris and Biden wanted things to be affordable for us, they would have brought the cost of goods down already. They would have stopped this astronomical spending, which contributes to the rising cost of goods, housing, and all of these things. JD Vance also goes into how this massive flood of illegal immigrants has driven the cost of housing up in some of these different areas as well. So there's all of these contributing factors. If this administration wanted things to be affordable for us, they would have addressed it already. And not only that, they wouldn't have let it get out of hand this much. It was not just about COVID recovery, because we could grant a little bit of grace for that. But it's about the fact that they've had 3 years to bring this down, to keep it down, to keep it from getting to this point. And they haven't. So when Tim Walz and when anybody else says, that Republicans are using an issue as a political point so that they can address it in their administration, that's pretty much a description of the entire Biden administration, is to create these crises so that we rely on them, so that we keep going back to them and begging them to save us, begging them to spend more money, begging them to pass legislation, something to make our lives easier. And if we don't need them, then they lose power. And that is something that the Democrats just can't have. So that's a huge, huge thing for them. Let me make sure I've got my correct clip. So this is JD Vance's response to that. And it's about 2 minutes long, but I think that it's worth listening to the whole thing. So let's listen to how he responded to this. And you can skip ahead 2 minutes if you've already heard it and you don't want to listen to him again. But here we go.
My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it, because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%, open the American southern border, and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
My question is the same.
So I appreciate everything that he brought up there, but again, if Kamala Harris wanted to do these things, she could have done them already. She would, her and her administration, the administration that she's a part of, would have made life easier for Americans already. And not only that, of course, we can look at Donald Trump's record where the cost of goods and housing was low. The cost of gas was low. There was a booming economy. There was job availability. People were actually like crying for workers because there was so much prosperity going on at that time. Of course, if you listen to the mainstream media, you never would have heard that. But if they did acknowledge that the economy was doing well, it's because they wanted to say that, well, anything positive that you can see happening in Donald Trump's economy is because Obama handed it to him. So there were times when they had to concede that things were going well, but of course they couldn't do it by giving him credit. But again, we have to look at both of these candidates. They both have a record of being in the White House. And what do those records look like? We have a record of prosperity, and we have a record where there are countless people coming out and saying, guess what? I can't afford to live. I can't afford to feed my family. I can't afford to pay my rent. And the people that are struggling and need things like food stamps and, public welfare programs are having to fight with illegal immigrants to scrounge for the minimal resources that we now have. And those resources are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's just mind-boggling to me. When it comes to trust, you have to ask, who has earned your trust? Is it somebody with the record of making sure that people can afford to feed their families? Or is it the person with the record of being a part of an administration that has made things completely unmanageable? And this thing about the corporate tax cuts, I am not an economist, I'm not an expert, but fundamentally, when you cut the taxes of large corporations and you cut the red tape and you make it easier for them to do business, these are the people that are also offering jobs. And when you allow them to thrive and for their businesses to bring in more revenue, that gives them the ability to pay their workers more, to offer more jobs, to grow their business, to offer more promotions. And so that's what that looks like. These cuts are not just so that these big corporations can get wealthy. It's so that they can offer more to the people that they employ and invest more into the economy. So that's what that is about. I mean, like I said, I'm not an expert on the issue, but just on a fundamental level, that's what that is about. But if you're just going to go on talking points, all of these things from Tim Walz would obviously sound fantastic. But as JD goes on to point out multiple times, again, is that if Kamala wanted to do these things, she could already. She doesn't even have to wait until November 5th. She could be doing them right now. But that's just not how it goes. The second, kind of the response to this was Waltz decided to revert to this talking point of trust the experts. And I'm not going to play that clip because for the sake of time, this live stream would be 4 hours long if I played every single clip. But this idea was to trust the experts. And I love what Vance had to say in response to this idea of trust the experts, whether it be on manufacturing, whether it be on education, whether it be on anything. Yes, he was specifically responding to this idea of manufacturing jobs and the subject at hand, but it's relevant to every time the Democrats bring this point up because we're learning that trusting the experts isn't always the answer. So let me bring this clip up really quick. Because I loved JD Vance's response to this, because this applies to every single time the Democrats just say, trust the experts.
Governor, you say trust the experts, but those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on. Governor, you say trust.
Well, did it again. The reason I think that it has become so important to address this idea of trust the experts, it's because, as I said, it has become this default talking point of the left, constantly saying, trust the experts. Again, whether it be in education or manufacturing or healthcare, it invalidates our concerns as citizens and basically tells us that we're not allowed to question what is happening. Even if we see disaster unfolding right before us, even if we see failing systems or failing education or a healthcare system that is not actually making us healthier. But if the experts say it's okay, and if we step in to try to stop it, apparently we're just going to make things worse because we're not an expert. So constantly using this phrase basically tells us that we're not allowed to speak up, that we're not allowed to have an opinion, that we're not allowed to try a different approach, and we're not allowed to express our concerns when things go downhill because an expert said that this was the best way forward. And we are learning that what this really seems to be is the ability for the Democrats to grant power to people to make decisions for the American people by people that we didn't elect, like Dr. Fauci, like Randy Weingarten, like Marcy Bowers, like to make policies that are actually hurting people and hurting children and taking away our freedoms and taking away our rights, because we're just supposed to do what the experts say. And Vance pointing out that the experts have used their degrees and their titles to abuse their power and to dictate policies to us that are politically driven and just happen to align with a particular side of the aisle. It just shows that the experts have lost their credibility, and they're not making their decisions based on what research and data shows, but what this particular political agenda wants them to accomplish, which, and as we can see, that really has not benefited us at all. So I appreciate him pointing that out. Of course, we're gonna, as Shane said, Nancy Pelosi profited her fortune double during COVID. Lots of people profited, not just billionaires. Yeah, it just seems to be that every time we are told what to do and we have other people imposing on our lives, that it seems to be the top 1% that are benefiting from our misfortune. So as we saw with Nancy Pelosi, she is just a prime example of that. So one of the next issues that, sorry, I wanted to make sure that I had the right clip. So one of the next issues, of course, was illegal immigration and border security. Now, this has become something that is extremely important because it is no secret that we have had at least 20 million people, I had to check my mic, at least 20 million illegal immigrants come into this country over the last 3 years. And there are real people in real communities that are suffering because of it. Now, of course, Tim Walz's approach was to resort to go back to this border bill that wasn't passed and repeat the lie that because this bill didn't go through, that's the reason that we've had this unprecedented invasion over the last 3 years, which, I'm sorry, you have to have the IQ of a bacon bit to actually believe that, because there's no way to say that we've had this much of a problem at our border because this particular bill that has been floating around for a decent amount of time at this point, but that is the reason that things have gotten out of control. I mean, first of all, they wouldn't need all of these additional resources if the border was under control. Trump didn't need all of these to implement all of these additional resources because the border was relatively secure at that time. Of course, people are always going to be able to get through. Of course, there's always going to be an issue with people bypassing our legal immigration process. It's always going to be a problem to a degree. But I remember even at the time when Trump was in office, there were people on the mainstream media saying that having 120,000 people, I believe it was per month, is considered a crisis. And now we have, I believe that was the clip. They were acknowledging that it was a crisis. They were criticizing him for not addressing this issue. But of course, they've completely flip-flopped on this thing, and now they just have let things get completely out of control and pretended it was an issue for as long as they possibly could. And now that it is, they want to pretend that this bill is going to solve all the problems. So let's listen to what they had to say here. This is the first clip on that discussion.
It is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable.
So just on the bill, border agents have repeatedly said that they did not need the things that this bill proposed. I mean, of course, extra resources would be nice, extra funding would be nice, but they have said over and over again that they just need to be able to enforce the laws that are already in place, that they've had their hands tied, that they can't send people back, that and all of the policies that Trump had in place were pretty much just eliminated entirely. But more to the point, this bill is not about stopping illegal immigration. And that is the thing that people want to hear and get some clarity on. Are you actually planning on curbing this problem, on stemming the flow, of stopping the bleed? And all of the things that this bill outlines is geared towards streamlining the process. It is geared towards getting people here faster and granting citizenship to everyone who has already come here. So when they talk about this, passing this bill and solving this problem, they're not talking about deportations. They are not talking about alleviating the stress that so many communities are feeling by taking on so many people that they do not have the resources to support. That is not what this is about. This was about passing funding to get more resources to detention centers and processing centers to make it easier and faster to get these people across the border and into the country, granting them citizenship faster, probably getting them driver's licenses and voting cards faster. So this isn't about actually solving the problem, but and it's not meant to do what the Democrats are painting it out to be. To them, solving the problem is getting more people here as quickly as possible. So basically, it is making it impossible to deport the people that are already here and the people that are wreaking havoc with crime and gang activity on already struggling communities, and making the devastation that we have seen because of this permanent, making it impossible to regain structure and law and order. And if Kamala Harris gets in, there isn't going to be any relief to these people that have been begging for assistance. And we're not going to be able to catch up on what we offer through our public assistance programs and actually take care of people in need. And the chaos that we have already seen is just going to get worse. So that is the plan of the Harris Waltz ticket. I almost forgot what his name was. Let's have a look at what JD Vance had to say in response to this.
Before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do, Margaret?
And I didn't have the rest of that clip, but what I believe he went on to say was, first, we have to address the illegal immigrants that are committing crimes, at least start there and then work out from there and see what makes sense as far as deportations. Because as much as the Democrats want to paint this to be some kind of mass roundup of people that are here illegally and just bussing them out, that's not something, first, that we're going to be able to accomplish. But secondly, we also recognize that there is a level of humanity that we have to have here for these people. But we also have to take care of our people first. And I don't understand why that is such a big issue for Democrats and Democrat voters in seeing all of these people and, Americans, good people, hardworking people that are not making this a political issue, but pointing out that this is not going to work, especially if we allow it to continue, and not saying, okay, we need to take care of these people first, and whatever we need to do to get that stabilized again, if that means, sending people back to their homes until we can clean up this mess and then reintroduce our legal immigration process again. I don't understand why that is such a hard thing for people on the left to grasp. But I believe this is the clip where they continue talking about illegal immigration. And this may have been...
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify.
Okay, so this is the clip where the moderators jump in and try to fact check what is going on here and their discussion about some of the policies that have been put in place because of the Biden-Harris administration that have not worked, that have led to this problem. And JD Vance tries to jump in and correct what they're saying. First, call them out for fact checking. And secondly, correct some of the things that they themselves are falsely implying or insinuating or outright stating about this situation. And it's absolutely worth watching.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, how many times did they say we have so much to get to just in that clip there? So again, if you were playing a drinking game and took a drink every time they said that, you would probably be dead by now. But what JD Vance, of course, was talking about was the CBP One app, where these illegal immigrants can go on their phone and basically, I think they can apply for asylum status or temporary protected status, and they basically just bypass the whole thing and come straight into the country. And so he is trying to explain that. Tim Walz jumps in and says these laws have been in the books since 1990. Yes, there are things regarding a green card and applying for actual legal status that have been on the books for decades, but the app itself was introduced in 2023. And when she says, thank you for explaining the legal process, like, that was gaslighting at its finest. What the Biden-Harris administration has done in the last few years has been anything but follow a legal process. And giving people an app to make it easier to get here does not make what they are doing any more legal. And they are pretending that illegally granting people protected status is the same as going through the legal immigration process, which is absolutely insane. So that was probably the most egregious moment from the ABC moderators. Digital Mining Solutions says, wow, just wanting to silence the truth. Absolutely. They cut the mic off there. And that's pretty much what it feels like when you're being censored by the left, when you try to point out the facts of a situation and they just try to ignore you. They try to get you censored. They don't cover it, the actual facts of the situation. That's pretty much censorship in real time. But one of the other moments there when JD Vance said, you promised, you said you weren't going to fact check us. Of course, Democrats are running with that, saying that he was implying or that he was admitting that what she was saying, that what she was saying was true, or that he was admitting that he was lying. But what he was doing was calling them out for being biased, calling them out for participating in the debate when they are not supposed to do that they are just moderators. They are not supposed to actually be active participants in this conversation. And that's what he was talking about. Of course, Democrats don't have the brain capacity usually to understand that. As Digital Mining Solutions says, it's now easier to apply for asylum than to order food on DoorDash. That is pretty much accurate. I actually remember some of the photos that came out probably within the first couple of years of this invasion. People waiting at the border, like sitting on the other side of the fence, waiting to get through, and actually having DoorDash like delivered to them as they were sitting there. So that was actually a thing that happened. But again, just continuing to say that granting people temporary protected status is the same as going through our legal immigration process is ridiculous. And Kamala Harris subverted our laws and ignored our laws by granting them this temporary protected status, which I think is just a strong indicator of what she plans to do. She's not going to send these people back, because if she was going to, she could have done that instead of giving them temporary protected status. So we know that she's not going to do that. So if you see chaos in any community, if you see people struggling, if you see people buckling under the weight of taking on all these people, that is going to be the entire country, because she is not going to send anybody back, and she does not care if people are struggling. And she doesn't care that she caused this. It's just mind-boggling to me. The phrase, when people show you who they are, believe them, just keeps popping up into my brain. But probably one of the favorite moments of the debate was this when the ABC, or not ABC, what, I don't know what network they were from, CBS, when they called out Tim Walz for lying about being in Tiananmen Square during the protests. And I think that this was probably the cringiest moment of the entire evening. So we're going to watch the 2-minute exchange here and then how they followed up, because there's no recovering from this. Let's have a look.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Oh, what does any of that have to do with supposedly lying about being in China for this horrific, bloody protest massacre? I mean, that I think the reason that he did this is because this is the approach that Kamala Harris has been allowed to get away with in so many of her answers. Like, don't respond to the question, but spend 2 minutes talking about your background and getting people to relate to you and focus on things that you view as accomplishments. And people will take that as an answer as a sufficient response. So I think that he thought that he could get away with this because Kamala Harris gets away with it all the time. When you ask her a question about the economy, she rambles for 2 minutes about her background and about growing up in a middle-class neighborhood and whatever else. And then you're like, oh yeah, what? So I really think that that's what he was trying to do. But even the moderators were like, that wasn't the question. So I have to applaud them just for not letting him get away with this. So you guys have to see this response, because it was this is the point where I legitimately thought that Tim Walz's head was going to explode. He turned bright red. Let's enjoy this in its glory.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Sorry, I didn't realize that that particular clip had some music over top of it. I really think that he was going, I think that he also thought they were going to let him just end with, I misspoke. And then he just sat there awkwardly and he's just keeps going and just digging that grave. And that seems to be Tim Walz's excuse for a lot of things, was I misspoke. I used the wrong words. I mean, and then probably the most honest thing that he said all evening is that he is a knucklehead. This guy is an absolute moron. There was no recovering from that. And I think that that was probably like the bombshell moment of the evening. He did have one more. I'm sorry. I almost feel bad for him. This guy is an idiot, though. One more bombshell moment that Tim Walz had that I want to show you guys if you did not listen is this is the conversation they were trying to have about gun control. And of course, they have to bring in the topic of school shootings. That's the only thing that Democrats are able to focus on. I mean, yes, obviously, very tragic situations. Obviously, this is not the country that we want our kids to be growing up in, but it is the reality of the situation. And I know that JD Vance touched on things like mental health and drug crises and broken homes and all of these things that contribute to our kids just completely falling apart and unable to cope in the world that they are growing up in. And if people really wanted to address the root cause of these school shootings, and not just that, but any kind of violence that kids have normalized, whether it be attacks against their teachers, attacks against other students, then we've got to address the things that are causing kids to feel this way, to feel like the only retaliation, the only option they have to deal with it is to take out their anger in this way, in this catastrophic way. But, you're never going to hear that from anybody on the Democrat side. And even Tim Walz, in one of his points, said that sometimes it is just the gun's fault or something like that. And no, but this is the point where he was talking about school shootings, and he said that he had met with Sandy Hook victims, and he ended it with quite the statement that we're like, what did he just say?
That office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. Parents, I've become friends with school shooters.
I'm sorry. I think that we can all acknowledge he probably meant to say that he became friends with victims, school shooting victims, but that's not what we heard. Timmy, that's not what we heard. So those were kind of some of the highlights of the debate. I think those are all of the clips. And the media had a few things to say that I just want to play really quick. This one came from Nicole, Wallace, who was apparently accusing JD Vance of mansplaining the border issue. And I actually find this kind of thing insulting when women like this put points out like this, as if women are like that. I can't handle somebody pointing out the facts to me, that if a man steps in and explains something to me in detail, that it's mansplaining and it's an insult, when honestly it's an insult. What is an insult is the idea that I can't handle people talking to me in facts and being blunt and being clear. So that's what this comes across to me as. But this is what Nicole had to say.
I actually think if you're a woman, that might be the worst moment JD Vance had, because he was going to mansplain right over that mute button. He was, and again, I don't pretend to know how everyone will react to this. I think that a lot of women in positions of authority that should command respect just by virtue of that dynamic will see themselves in some dude that disrespected them and talked over. I mean, there was a moment like that with then vice presidential in the Harris Pence debate.
Okay, so we don't need to go any more into that, but I actually find, like I said, I find it insulting, this idea that women can't handle having a conversation, can't handle somebody challenging them. And this also says to me that women are unable to listen. We're incapable of listening to someone even when we disagree with them. So I just I hate everything about that take. I just think it's completely ridiculous. If you ask Joe Scarborough, he believes that Tim Walz won, and this is a little bit of what he had to say about that.
This debate, if you look at the CNN polling, it shows Vance a slight advantage, but in terms of favorability, again, his favorability rating went up 59%. Unfavorable 22%, Vance 41%,
That's interesting.
and
Good.
44. Well, you know, as you're looking at that number, it's really interesting. You look at that number. There's no doubt that, despite the fact, if you look at the numbers, Waltz won this debate.
Okay, sorry, I forgot that he said that right at the beginning of the clip, but you get it. There are people that are very clearly in denial about how this all played out. Now, I want to just say what I think was accomplished by this is obviously not that I don't really think that anybody's votes are going to be changed by this. I don't think that that is something that happens with these debates anymore. I don't think that they have the impact perhaps that they used to. But what I think happened here is that Vance was able to break down barriers. Like, the media has spent years not only demonizing Trump, but demonizing Trump supporters, as in, we're all, when they say the big, anything about the big bad orange man, we're all the big bad orange man to them. Whatever fear that people have about Trump is the fear that they have about, that they need to have about us as supporters, because apparently we're all extremists who want to take your rights away. So anything that they say about Trump is something that they are trying to say about us, which is, as much as people say that Trump has divided the country, they really need to look at the media rhetoric and see just how divisive they have been, because it's not about disagreeing with the candidate. It's about being afraid of literally half the country. So, but I think Vance broke down that narrative that we're not all Trump, that we're reasonable. And throughout the debate, Vance kept saying, well, I agree with you on that. And he pointed to the fact that this is about what we think the solution is. And Walz also kept saying that to Vance, that I agree with you. And to me, it's a little contradictory to keep saying that you agree with someone, yet still trying to maintain this media narrative that we're about this dictatorship and that we're all schmazzies and Schmittler. And I think that's what I think was accomplished more than anything, making people doubt the idea that we're too scary to have a conversation with, or to discuss the issues with, or even to share a country with. And I really actually appreciate that he was able to do that, because we need people that can lower the temperature. We need people that can bring that sense of unity back. And I think a lot of people are really, really craving that unity. This was one of the takes that I saw on TikTok, and I have absolutely no idea what this person's like political affiliation was, but I saw a lot of people with the same sentiment. So this is just a little bit of her feedback.
I wasn't going to make a TikTok today, but did anybody else think that the vice presidential debate was oddly refreshing? Is that weird for me to say? Like, I thought it was oddly refreshing to watch two people that fundamentally disagree, but treat each other with dignity and respect, and have dignity and respect. I mean, when was the last time we've seen that?
And I think that is a great question. And I think people are realizing how much of that has been lost. I think people are realizing how much we are truly craving that, how much we value that, being able to have a civil conversation with people, even if we disagree with them. And we don't have to, and like I said, I have no idea what this girl's political affiliation is, but I think that really resonated with people. breaking down those barriers and be able to say, you know what, I think we can actually have a conversation with people that support Trump. If we can have a conversation with the guy that is literally running on the Trump ticket, then there's a really good chance we're going to be able to have a conversation with somebody who's simply just voting for the man. So, like I said, I think that was, I really appreciated that. This guy, again, I think just kind of demonstrates that. And then I have one more like kind of funny take, but this is what he had to say.
Now, I want to make this very clear, and I do mean very clear. I don't think the Republicans or the Democrats give a damn about me or what I want for this country. But after watching JD Vance tonight, I ain't even gonna lie to you. If he was to run for president next election, his composure, his enunciation, his vernacular, I might vote for him. I ain't even gonna lie to you.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair. And I think it's important to realize that I do think that in a lot of ways, Trump selected Vance as this insurance policy, because I mean, we really do have to call into question if this man is even going to make it to November 5th. And if he does, how far past November 5th is he going to go? And I mean that probably in the darkest way possible. I'll let you run with that. But can we see JD Vance taking over for Trump? And I think that people are okay with that idea and they're not threatened by that. And I think that makes the Trump ticket more palatable for them, more reasonable, less scary in a lot of ways. So I thought that was really nice to hear. This girl, I don't know what she was on, but it's absolutely worth just sharing really quick, because this was like one of the first reactions I saw on TikTok. I don't even know what to say about this.
Is there like a website or a Google form where you can apply for Tim Walz to adopt you? And I mean, it doesn't have to be to replace your dad. It could just be like a bonus dad. But also, it could if you need it.
Okay. I just wanted to show that because I was like, what? What? So anyway, so that was just kind of how I felt about the whole evening. I thought that JD Vance did a phenomenal job. I think he did a great job of restoring that sense of sanity and presenting to people that we truly do want to come together on these issues. We want to be able to discuss these issues. We want to be able to debate these issues, that we are not scary, that we don't want a dictatorship, that we agree that there are a lot of things in crisis in this issue, in this country right now, but we have to acknowledge how we got here. And from that, you should be able to see the path forward that makes the most sense. And I am not saying that you have to love Donald Trump and you have to go out and buy yourself a MAGA hat, but we need to acknowledge that with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, we are going to get more of the same, because they have demonstrated exactly what they stand for, what their values are. And that, as we are seeing with, as we have seen with so many things that people have struggled with in this country, whether it be disasters like East Palestine and Lahaina, Afghanistan, people crying from Springfield, Aurora, Chicago, New York, people dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, consistently, the government that we have now has abandoned American citizens. And now we have people talking about how the economy is crippling them. We have people wondering what it's going to look like if we don't address this immigration problem. And we have seen consistently from the last 3.5 years how many crises have erupted since then, and questioning whether or not it makes sense to vote for the people that have allowed these things to happen, or to perhaps change course and then reevaluate in a few years. So I appreciate what was accomplished in that debate, and I appreciate them coming together. And I think the fact that Tim Walz didn't actually break down and cry was a win, because that was pretty much like the bar that I set for him. Like, if he can just get through the evening and not burst into tears, like That's a win for me. So I thought it was awesome. There is one more story I do want to get into that has nothing to do with the debate, but I think that we need to continue to talk about the P. Diddy case. And if you guys have any other comments about the debate, I will get back to them at the end of this little segment here, but I do want to bring to light the P. Diddy case because some of the things that have come out, it's impossible to even know where to start with this or what to touch on, what to address, because there's so much information. But one of the press conferences that I saw yesterday and an article that also came out is just basically starting to expose the number of victims that this man terrorized over the last who knows how many decades. So let's have a look because we need to keep this in the spotlight because I believe that we're not just going to get a sprinkling of information as time goes on, but I truly think and I truly hope that the dam breaks and the floodgates open and we find out every single person who was ever involved in this, who knew what and when, and who let these things go on for as long as they did. In the last video that I did on this subject, I basically just covered some of the initial charges that were in the indictment, like sex trafficking and racketeering, and I believe it was something to do with prostitution. I'm not entirely sure, but there were a lot of things that were in those initial charges. But considering how long this went on and how many people that we know had a relationship with P. Diddy and what those activities look like, and not only that, how these freak-off parties were so well known throughout Hollywood, there's going to be so much information. And I imagine that people in Hollywood are absolutely sweating about this. And I hope that they are sweating. I hope that they are losing sleep over this because we need to know every single person that was involved in this to any degree. So trigger warning, if you need a trigger warning, there are some things, I'm not going to go into details, but there are some things that we just need to touch on. It says Diddy accused of abusing 9-year-old boy and spiking drinks with horse tranquilizer as 120 victims come forward with shocking claims. So it says in bombshell allegations, here, I'll make this bigger so you guys can follow along. It says in bombshell allegations, an additional 120 victims have come forward to accuse rapper Sean Diddy Combs of sex abuse with several underage victims, including a 9-year-old among them. The claims were made by Texas lawyer Tony Busby, who announced he's representing 120 new victims who he believes have legitimate cases against the rapper turned media mogul. Of the 120 new victims, 25 were underage when the alleged abuse happened between 1991 and as recently as this year, Busby revealed. The youngest victims were 9, 14, and 15 when they were victimized, the high-profile lawyer announced at a press conference in Houston on Tuesday. This individual, who was 9 years old at the time, was taken to an audition in New York City with Bad Boy Records. This individual was sexually abused allegedly by Sean Combs and several other people at the studio in the promise to both his parents and to himself of getting a record deal. I have a question. Did the parents know that this is what they were exchanging for that record deal? Like, did they come to them and say, let me have your kid and let me do what I want with them? And then, he's going to climb the ladder. I mean, how exactly did that conversation play out? So not only that, there was a press conference yesterday, and he does repeat, I believe this is the attorney, Tony Busby, and he goes over some of these things, but some of the other information that came out in this, we need to absolutely be aware of. So let's just listen to a little bit of this.
And victims are coming forward. Our team has had at this point more than 3,285 individuals contact us with people claiming to have been victimized by Sean Combs. After vetting, we now represent 120 individuals who intend to bring civil claims in civil court against Sean Diddy Combs, as well as claims against many other individuals and entities that we will name as defendants as we file these individual cases. And you should know, to the extent the clients feel comfortable, we also intend to make these individuals available to the authorities, specifically to the FBI. And you should also know a few of them have already been spoken to by the FBI. Now, before we discuss the nature of the claims and claimants themselves, let me comment on the large volume of calls we have received since our first announcement. Even before the indictment of Sean Combs, we had received a small volume of calls and had screened a handful of cases. After the indictment of Sean Combs and the announcement that we were pursuing these claims, the floodgates opened. People who wouldn't otherwise, for a variety of reasons, are now stepping forward to make their voices heard and to pursue justice. But no, most of these people are scared. They fear backlash in their communities. They fear backlash in their own families. They are afraid of retaliation from the perpetrators and their associates. They are rightly afraid for their own personal safety. I expect that through this process, many powerful people will be exposed. Many dirty secrets will be revealed. We know what we are potentially up against. And as is always the case in situations like this, when a celebrity is involved, people can be downright mean and nasty. You would be shocked at the length fans will go, no matter the evidence to the contrary, to defend celebrities they love. I mean, there's a reason for this word fans. They're fanatics. I've personally already been threatened multiple times on social media. And when I agreed to pursue this, I expected as much. This isn't my first rodeo. But victims who step forward to have their voices heard should not be subjected to that kind of conduct. They should not be targeted.
So that was that, at least about 2.5 minutes of that conference. And he says that there have been over 3,000 people that have called with some kind of claim against Sean Combs. Of course, they're representing 120 of these people. So obviously there's probably a lot of factors in determining who has a case, who has evidence, who has just any number of things. I'm not an expert, but they obviously are not going to be able to represent over 3,000 people because you have to meet these different factors. But when it says there's this comment, why did it take so long for this to come out? As he mentioned there, this involves a lot of powerful people. This involves people that Sean Combs probably has footage of, that has info of, that has some kind of perhaps video footage of. These are all just speculation. These are not things that I know to be fact, but this is the reason that a lot of people don't speak out about these things, is because, as he said, they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of what is going to happen if they are exposed for their involvement on any level. Of course, this, again, in the celebrity industry, there's also a question of how is it going to affect their career? Is it going to put a black mark on their hireability for different roles and in elevating themselves? There's so many different things, and these are people that have a lot of power, a lot of status, a lot of money, and they can make your life a living hell if you decide to step up and speak out about it. So I understand it to a point, but at the same time, the things that I have read that I'm not going to play now because they are horrific, that some of the things that these victims have experienced is beyond horrifying. And as I've mentioned before, I am somebody that listens to a lot of true crime. So I've listened to a lot of stories about particularly children experiencing this horrific abuse. And what really boggles my mind is not only the fact that anybody can do this to a child, or, to innocent people in general, but to a child specifically, the mindset that you have to be in, the sick and twisted person that you have to be to do this to a kid. But to be somebody in the vicinity of that child, whether it be a parent, a friend, an associate, a teacher, somebody that knows that this is going on, and to say nothing and allow it to happen, That is really what gets to me. I mean, psychopaths, sociopaths, they're going to do psychopathic and sociopathic things. But when you have people that perhaps are not out of their mind and they still allow these things to happen and they say nothing and they know that it is these horrific things are going on, that to me is inexcusable. I don't care what you stand to lose. I don't care what risk to your career you might face. That child knows that you know. That child knows that there's this entire crowd, an industry of people that knows that these things are going on. And they also know that nobody is standing up to protect them. And that is mind-boggling to me. And that is why I absolutely hope that we find out every single person that was involved in this, to what degree, and that to what degree they were involved or that they knew, that they are punished to the fullest extent of the law, because this is inexcusable. One more aspect of this that I want to touch on, because we know that there are a lot of powerful people. Well, no, we can assume that there were a lot of powerful people involved in this and that knew about this. This is an article that says that there's a tape with an even more high-profile celeb being shopped around. So there's somebody apparently that has been discovered that is even more powerful, more well-known, more connected than Sean Combs that was involved in this. And they have video evidence of this. So it says, a sexually explicit video of Sean Diddy Combs and another A-list celebrity is allegedly being shopped around in wake of the disgraced rapper's arrest, according to the attorney of one of his accusers. During a recent appearance on News Nation, Ariel Mitchell Kidd claimed she was contacted regarding the sale of the Diddy tapes, which she declined. There already have been tapes leaking around Hollywood, being shopped around to individuals in Hollywood. But one in particular person contacted me to shop a particular video they were in possession of and to contact the person who was in the video to see if they were interested in purchasing the video before it became public knowledge. Mitchell Kidd claimed it was a catch and kill type of situation. However, she did not reveal the identity of the alleged participant. I can verify that it exists, that it's real, and that the person in the video is very visible. There's no question of who that person is. It doesn't seem like that person knows they were being videotaped. It didn't seem like they were an active participant in the videotaping. It seemed like they were being surreptitiously recorded. So Digital Mining Solutions says they believe it is Jay-Z. I don't know. But again, if we have two very high profile people that are involved in this and that know that this was going on, then who else knew about it? Because you can't have these kind of things going on with like the most powerful people in Hollywood and pretty much stay out of it. It would be impossible not to know that this was going on. So I think Hollywood is going down. I personally hope Hollywood goes down, because we spent years idolizing these people. We spent years supporting them and buying into the idea that they were living these flashy, happy lives because of their celebrity status and because of the money they were earning and the beautiful homes that they lived in. And they were able to sell this very shiny, sparkly idea and veneer to us. And it turns out all of it was completely fake. And I mean, of course, we knew that it was to a degree. And of course, we knew that Hollywood had these type of people in it. But the fact that this seems to be like 98% of Hollywood is disgusting to me. And every single one of them needs to be held accountable. So again, I hope, as Digital Mining Solutions says, I hope this is the beginning of the end. I couldn't agree more. Before I close this video, because I know we're about an hour and 15 minutes, if you guys have any questions on issues that we haven't talked about today, if you want my opinion on anything that is going on, just any random question, I'll give you about 60 seconds if there's anything you want to discuss before I head out. But I appreciate you guys. I always appreciate you tuning in. I always appreciate you participating. I feel like I'm really enjoying chatting with you and doing these live streams and going over these issues. I have some more content coming out this week, and I do appreciate your support. So I'm not seeing any comments and questions that you guys have, which is totally fine. But I will be back with you next Wednesday at 10 a.m. I also am doing the live stream with Joe Mobley tomorrow evening at 7:30. So I will see you then. And I really do appreciate you guys. I will see you in the next one. Bye.